Welcome back to the Views from the Gravel Up podcast. We're back again for another draft-related episode, as we are now just less than 3 weeks away from the draft. So it should be fun. A lot to talk about. We're going to be talking about 8 different cornerback prospects today. But without further ado, I'm going to welcome my guest Ryan, who's been on a couple times, close friend of the show, does a lot of good stuff from Buffalo Sports Talk podcast. How are you doing tonight, Ryan? This lovely
Doing great.
Monday
Doing
night.
great. It's draft season. I mean, I'm really excited to talk cornerbacks here. So just excited to hop into it and always excited to talk the draft.
Should be fun. Should be a lot of fun. And if you guys haven't already, check out his episode. He did a latest episode talking a lot of cornerback stuff. Did a lot of good stuff there. You and Max do a great job over there at digging into some of these cornerbacks. But we're kind of going to get into it, and I'm going to use some of that stuff you guys talked about and kind of dive into some of that knowledge because there's a lot of good players, a lot of interesting players, and a lot of interesting options for the Bills. Specifically today, we're going to talk about guys that are within the range of the first 3 picks. So first or second round guys. Whatever you may feel about it. I did have maybe a guy that's more on the brink of a third round grade, but most of the guys will be in consideration and in play for those 3 picks. But I want to start off with Shavon Revel because the Bills, it recently came out that he had a top 30 visit with the Bills, and he's a very polarizing player. Obviously, unreal, off the charts athleticism. 92nd percentile in height at 6'2", 194 pounds, 32 and 5/8 inch arms. He didn't obviously test because he had the ACL injury. He had forced 3 interceptions over the last 2 seasons, 12 pass breakups, a completion percentage of 38% when targeted, and 57.1 pass rating allowed. Ryan, I'm going to let you kind of take the lead here. What do you like about Revel and as a possible option for the Bills at 30? And if you don't, you can get into that as well. But he's a very interesting player, and a lot of people I think are kind of split on him.
Yeah, I mean, just to talk about the corner class overall too, I think there's a few guys in this situation here like Revel, where coming off an injury, had a torn ACL. There's a lot of question marks with, also played at East Carolina. A lot of guys in this class have multiple flaws like that. But with Revel, I think he's one of the guys that has greater upside. Long athletic corner, did a great job playing at East Carolina. You mentioned the measurables too, ran a 4.4 40, 62.6 rating when targeted. I really like Revel. It's just the thing for me is the injury that he's coming off of that is very concerning, especially if you want him to jump in, play across from Christian Benford right away. A few other things I just kind of pulled off for some of his flaws, I guess you could say. Racked up 6 penalties and also had 4 dropped interceptions. So, it's good that he's in the right place. Obviously, you have to be in the right place to get penalties. You have to be in the right place to get dropped interceptions, but just needs to polish some things up. And it's a guy that I'm definitely eyeing. I don't know about at 30. Maybe I'd feel more comfortable if they traded back a few picks and maybe went to 40 or 45 and took him, or moved up from 52 or 60. But definitely a guy I'm eyeing in this corner class, despite all these guys and a few of these guys having flaws, especially as you look into the second round.
Yeah, I definitely think there's quite a few guys with medical concerns, but obviously that ACL, it's a big deal. I'm a little bit higher on him than the consensus, I would say. I think the home run swing is there to be had. And I know people want the instant impact and the player that's going to step right away and help out this team, but that's just not how this front office operates. They like to take swings. Think of Spencer Brown in the 3rd round out of Northern Iowa. Very, very raw player. Greg Rousseau, when they drafted him, didn't play too much defensive line before he really got drafted by the Bills. He kind of fits that mold. And I just look at the traits and the athleticism, and obviously it stands out. But those kind of traits, they don't grow on trees, right? And I think if he didn't tear that ACL and he kind of gave us another year of film, and maybe we'd see a little bit more refinement from his game and you wouldn't see some of those issues pop up, he would be a bona fide first-round pick. I just think the elite athleticism, he can definitely shadow any wide receiver that's, opposite him. He has really, really solid speed. He's scheme versatile too, so he can play man and zone. Now, obviously, you prefer the zone because obviously that's what the Bills do. But, to have a little bit of both is also a nice added bonus. And I just think, like you said, he's very, very raw, but he has those traits that might be willing to take that risk. 30 might be a little early. I would say probably trade back, see what you can get in the early second round, because I don't think the cornerback class is the disparity in talent isn't huge. So you can go out and get more assets and load up and kind of do it that way. So I think that's a good idea as well. So yeah, very fun player. I liked him a lot, but I know a lot of people are split on him. I want to talk about this guy though, because I know you're really high on him. It's Darien Porter of Iowa State, because he is a fun player. Obviously, didn't start until his 6th year in college, so he doesn't have a ton of real starting experience. Transitions from wide receiver to corner. He's 97th percentile in height, 60th percentile in weight. So he's obviously a freak. He's got a 9.9 relative athletic score, which is 5th out of 2,752 corners since 1987. And he ran a pretty good 40-yard dash, 2nd out of all cornerbacks behind Maxwell Hairston. Kind of tell us why you like him so much, because he's an older prospect, and you got to kind of sell yourself on it a little bit because of the lack of experience and a little bit of the rawness there. But there's a lot to like with him. So tell us what you like about Porter for us.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, first off, like, I don't like this guy for 30 at all.
No.
Talking kind of late back of the 2nd round, but it's a guy I think that has screaming potential here, like elite potential. You talked about the size, you talked about the athleticism, and yeah, there's of course concerns. Didn't really start until his 5th season in college. Transitioned from a wide receiver, but with that 6'3" frame, I think his potential on the outside as a corner is massive, and that athleticism too. One of the stats that I just came across that I think is the biggest testament of this guy is, first off, he was targeted 17 times and across the entire 2024 season, only allowed 5 receptions for 70 yards, still had 3 interceptions on those 17 targets, and a 4.7 passer rating when targeted, which was the lowest among all corners with 100 snaps played, by 10 points there on the passer rating. So just the stats kind of back this, the athleticism backs it. But when I watch him play, there are clear flaws. Like, he struggles in man coverage because he's so big. His hips are a little bit tight. If you watch some of the stuff that he did at the Senior Bowl, he was getting cooked in a lot of the one-on-ones, which is definitely concerning. I think the thing with him, though, is he's a really good zone corner. He's a big body.
Yeah.
He can cover a lot of ground, and that's exactly what the Bills run. They run a lot of zone. I think they want to get into some more man coverage. You saw that a little bit last year with Bobby Babbage, but in a situation where maybe you could groom him a little bit more, I think he could be a really, really good corner down the road. But I also think, unlike Kyrie Elam, where it just didn't work out on the outside, you could do a lot of different things with Darien Porter. You could move him to safety in a few years if it doesn't work out. And I know that's not ideal, and I know that's what people don't want to hear. But if it doesn't work out at outside corner, I think you could move him to safety. And he's also a hell of a special teamer. If you go and you look this guy up on YouTube, you look up his tape, whatever it is, in addition to him playing just outside corner, he's lining up on the edge of field goal block, using his length, using his athleticism to go block field goals. He's blocking punts. He's making tackles on punt coverage. Just a great athlete overall that, look, if it didn't work out at corner at the end of the day, and I know that's not what people want to hear in this draft class when the Bills need a cornerback too, he could easily transition, I think, to another position or be a great special teams asset. But that, potential at corner is still amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. I like that you threw in the special teams part, because I was going to talk about that too, because I think that just shows like a competitive nature to him. Like he's willing to do the dirty work. He's willing to put in the extra effort. And I think the Bills are going to fall in love with something like that. How they like their players, and the guys that are going to work, do the extra mile, guys that are willing to put it all on the line. And I think he fits that mold perfectly. And, obviously he is an older prospect. And I think that was my biggest con when I looked at his game. But and that's not even a bad thing, really. I think I look at it from the starting experience he's had at corner. It's very limited. I think the age thing is a little overblown, but obviously it matters. And I think, when you talk about him being a former receiver, that's just going to help you even more as a corner with your ball skills and your ball tracking ability. You're going to have a leg up in that area. Obviously he has track speed. He was a track star in high school. So that background also develops his play as a corner. And I think, he has a really good understanding of routes and route timing and route concepts. So like you said, he is a natural fit into the Bills scheme. And I think if you're going to take a corner, especially on day 2 of the draft, I'd rather have you take a guy that needs to learn man coverage more than he needs to learn zone. Because that's kind of the mistake we made with Kyrie Elam. He was a man-heavy corner. That was the background he came from. And you kind of had to teach him your way of doing it, and it just didn't work out well. And I think you kind of have to learn from your mistakes and understand, hey, here's a player that can fit in your scheme, has the really, really good athleticism to pair with that. So he's a good player. I would say he needs to clean up the tackling a little bit. He does lunge a little bit as a tackler. But yeah, really good feel for cover 2 and cover 3. I like him a lot. And you had mentioned the statistical profile he presented. I know it's a smaller sample size and people will probably point that out. It's still impressive to me. I mean, you don't just luck into that kind of stuff. He was teams were literally just not throwing to his side of the field because he was so good. So really intriguing player, and definitely somebody I would love if you're looking end of the second round range. I would probably go with that. Do you kind of agree with that? Second round,
Yeah,
late second round, probably.
I'd agree with that. I'm definitely eyeing him, I think, at 60. I'd be interested if
Yeah,
they take him at that first pick in the second round. But also, you mentioned like only 17 receptions. You said teams not looking his way. It's because really he's a 6'3" corner with
yeah,
good
right.
ball skills and a future wide receiver. I'm a former wide receiver. So,
Mhm.
like, am I really going to go trust my 6'1" wide receiver to go beat that guy down the field? Like we talk about Keon Coleman turning a 50-50 ball into a 80-20 or a 70-30. That's exactly
Mhm.
what Darien Porter can do as a corner. So,
Yeah.
again, really excited about this guy's potential. But we also mentioned, the name that maybe should not be said, Kyrie Elam. I'm interested to see as we talk about this class where the Bills end up going, because certainly there's flaws in every player, and
Yeah.
do they shy away from what Kyrie showed?
Yeah, definitely. The next player I wanted to talk about is Benjamin Morrison from Notre Dame. I had quote tweeted you because you had talked about him earlier this week about him as a fit for the Bills. He is really a smart and technically sound player, and I think he's a player that the Bills are going to really fall in love with in the draft process because he just kind of checks all those boxes they look for in a corner. And we talk about a team that squeezes the most out of the corner position, with Kyrie Lynn being the exception to the rule. Benjamin Morrison's a really fun player because I think you know what you're getting with Benjamin Morrison, right? Like, he might not be this superstar stud corner, but he's going to be a guy I think could come in, plug and play as your number 2 corner right away because he has the feel and the experience as his own corner. He's patient. He has really good production. We're talking about a guy that's, he's not overly athletic. He's not a great athlete, but he ran a pretty solid 40-yard dash. He's above average in height, pretty much average size. So like he's fine. And I think he's really good at the catch point, really strong player. And then that's backed up by his 9 interceptions, 12 pass breakups. He has a career 44.1 passer rating allowed. And again, back to the experience thing, he started all 3 years at Notre Dame. I kind of wanted to hear your thoughts on him again. He's a very interesting player, very smart player. At least that's kind of the takeaway I had with Benjamin Morrison. And I kind of just felt like he was a good option, especially at the end of the first round. If you don't have much available, trade back a few spots. He, to me, would be a perfect option early on day 2 if you decide to go to the same route as you did last year with Keon Coleman.
Yeah, as we talk about guys coming off injuries in this class, I'm really interested to see where he goes. Fully agree with you that I think that the Bills could move back a few picks and get him. If he wasn't coming off an injury, I would, sign off on the Bills getting him at 30 right away. A guy who,
Right.
since he stepped into college football in 2022, where he had 6 interceptions, only allowed 1 touchdown, 29.2 rating, was third in college football. He has just flashed as an 18, 19-year-old kid. And he went up against Marvin Harrison, Namika Egbuka, and Zay Flowers in 2022. And, he lost some reps, but he won a lot of reps too. And for a guy that showed so much as a young player and then transitioned that into the next year where he was good and he had 3 interceptions and only allowed 1 touchdown and had a 60.8 rating that year, transitioned that then into a good 2024 before his injury. And I just think overall it's a really good player that my co-host Max definitely kind of
Mhm.
nudged me towards a little bit as I prepared for the draft this year. But it's a guy that I think, as you said, could line up as a cornerback too across from Benford. I'd feel really comfortable about it as long as he's 100%. And we
Mhm.
put it out there too on Twitter that I think this is a guy that the injury will scare people off. The injury will push his draft stock back, but this is a potential day 1 corner that you could get on day 2.
Yeah, definitely. That's what good teams do. You take advantage of teams overlooking players due to injuries and what other circumstances may be surrounding them. And I think he's no exception. He's a really talented player. It's backed up with his production. It's backed up with his feel and experience at the position. And I just love how he plays. And a lot of his teammates and a lot of his coaches raved about his work ethic and his maturity and the way he approached the game. That to me is really important to understand what kind of person we're getting, what kind of player we're getting. Again, we can only say so much about the player on the film that we see. We don't know, who the person is, and that's who the Bills, are, there to evaluate. And it seems like he's a great guy. And again, very high floor player. And I think, you can't go wrong with a guy like Benjamin Morrison. And again, another player that struggles a little bit with tackling. His tackle rate was a little high. It exceeded 16%. And he's got a little bit of a lighter build, but when you get to the range that we're talking about, you're not going to find perfect players. And I think, especially for what the Bills do on defense, you can't go wrong. I love Benjamin Morrison as a player. And he is, I would say, behind Amos and Revel, he ranks right behind them for me. I really like him as an option, especially early on day 2 if they decide to go that route. Speaking of Amos, Trey Amos, who seems like the perfect fit for the Bills. It's been talked about all over Twitter, everywhere you look. Cover One does a great job. They keep bringing him up as a fit. The guys over there, Eric and Anthony, talk about him as a fit. He is a player I really like because you kind of just get a little bit of everything with Trey Amos, and it feels like it's a slam dunk addition at 30. Obviously, he's got 81st percentile height, 60th percentile weight. Decently long arms. He's got a pretty solid, relative athletic score, which he came out a little bit higher than I thought it would. So it kind of bumped his grade up for me. Another notable thing that he did at the combine, he had the 4th highest max acceleration at the combine. And he just looked very fluid in the drills. Production notes, he used 54.3 passer rating allowed, 51 completion percentage allowed, 3 interceptions, 10 pass breakups. That is tied for second among all draft eligible cornerbacks. And he was in the 97th percentile in force and completion rate over the last 2 seasons. Really, really good fit for the Bills, and he's going to be heavily considered. And I'm sure it will come out in the coming days that the Bills have met with him, or some capacity they will meet with him. I kind of touch base on it, his well-roundedness. Can you kind of get into that for us and why he's such a good fit for the Bills?
Yeah, I mean, it's the ideal fit at 30. I think as we kind of talk about who's going to be available at 30, it's so hard to know at this point. And I don't even know if we will know on draft night. It's a weird class like that, but it's one of the few players that you're really, really hoping is available at 30. And there's a good chance that he is. I think, shows great ball skills, good timing with his hands, breaking up passes, being in good position. And it's not just technique, but also just timing, knowing when the receiver is going to go catch that ball and being able to time it so you don't get a penalty. He's long, he's lanky, plays tight coverage in contested situations against large receivers and tight ends too. I think, the one thing that's, the best part about him is just his hips are really, really fluid, which allows him to be sticky in man coverage, but he's also really smart, good processor, plays good zone coverage. So just kind of that, being able to put him across from Christian Benford and he can play both zone, play both man. It would be a really good trait to have. And I've heard the one comparison kind of floating around is Tre'Davious White too. And I see that a little bit in his game. So I think that would be a lot of fun to bring another Trey. That's a good corner to Buffalo.
Yeah. I mean, I agree with that comparison 100%. I would say he's a little bit more athletically gifted than Trey was coming out. I mean, Trey, obviously, I want to say he was a little bit less of an athlete coming out of LSU, obviously. But, I mean, Trey Amos, he is just the scheme versatility is what stands out to me. He played 35% of his snaps in man coverage. He had a 78.8 PFF grade in zone coverage, 75.4 PFF grade in man coverage. So he has shown an ability to play both coverages. And I know PFF can be a little bit flawed when you look at their numbers and their grading system, but I think it's a good, at least a baseline and an indicator that he can play both. And obviously, you talked about his fluidity in his hips. He transitions very well, very, very well transitioning. And he excels against the run, too. I think he wraps up well. He does a good job, throwing his body there and playing with a physical nature. He's comfortable doing that. And so really, as more and more as I watched him, I'm like, what does he not do right? And it's just like, the only thing I could come away with, he's like just not overly great at one thing. He's just really good at everything. And like, I can't even tell you that's bad. He just ton of experience, 2,400 coverage snaps at 3 different programs. And again, he's a player that you can instantly slot in as your number 2 corner. And it feels like this would be probably the most ideal pick and the most realistic pick. As I don't know if he's going to go a little bit earlier. If he does, I wouldn't be shocked. But again, if he's there at 30, I think the Bills should at least run to the podium and not look back. I just think he's that good of a player. He comes in and he immediately forms a very, very good cornerback duo with Christian Benford. So really, really fun player. I like Trey Amos a lot. We kind of move forward here. Player I'm a little bit lower on than most. He's still a good player. I'm not going to go out here and bash him. Is Azareye'h Thomas from Florida State. He's a bigger guy, 92nd percentile in height, 68th percentile in weight. He's got really big 10-inch hands. He had some really solid production in 2024, only allowed 17 reception. He's played a ton of man coverage. So we kind of bring up the name again, Kaiir Elam. He kind of is in that mold where he plays a ton of man coverage at Florida State. And that's why he's a little bit lower on my board than most, because I just think the schematic fit isn't really there, because he just played so much man coverage, which isn't a bad thing. You can teach him and teach him technique, and he can grow and learn as a player, especially at his age. But touch base on Azareye'h Thomas. I can't get the name right for some reason. Ryan,
Azareye'h, I think it is.
Yeah, I'm trying so much. His names in this draft cycle is just crazy. It's like I can't get one. It's like always one name I'm just tripping up on. But I didn't mean to cut you off. Kind of tell us a little bit about Azareye'h Thomas.
No, you're good. I struggle with names too. I try to make notes. Azareye'h Thomas, I think it is. No, you mentioned I think I'm not a big fan of him to start out. It's a guy that's definitely lower on my board in this class. A guy that I actually wouldn't even feel very comfortable picking in the back half of the second round. I would elect to go elsewhere. It's just I feel like he's almost a little too like Kaiir Elam. I think you touched on that a little bit, but just getting a little too handsy for my liking when he gets beat on routes. A really sticky, aggressive, hands-on press man corner that can jam you at the line of scrimmage, run with you down the sideline, showing good hip fluidity, but just doesn't possess elite athleticism. I think he makes up with that for good footwork and understanding of route concepts and ball skills, but just a little too handsy for my liking, not super athletic, doesn't really show a ton of zone ability. It's almost PTSD from Kaiir Elam. I'm almost just out on this guy because of it.
I know. And I know a lot of people like him, but I think especially when he tested with that 4.58 40-yard dash, which is obviously really bad, 19th percentile, that soured me even more. I mean, I think he makes up for it a little bit with his longer strides. Obviously, he's a taller dude, so he can have those longer strides, and he covers ground that way. And like you said, he's a very good press man corner. He's going to get physical with you at the line of scrimmage. He does a nice job punching, and he has the ideal weight and height you look for in a corner. But I just don't think he's a fit schematically. And it's pretty obvious. It just doesn't seem like you should take that swing again. I think you've learned from your mistakes. You know what works, you know what doesn't, especially with a guy like Christian Benford. And you kind of can compare that with Elam. Okay, this is what we should be looking for. And he does. Obviously, he would be an absolute outlier if the Bills take him. And again, the speed thing, I know it can get overvalued, especially 40 times. But for corner specifically, 40 time is a really good way to see where they're at. And I think it's a huge slice of the pie. And him running that time scares me a little bit. And it almost dropped his grade to a third round. I would say later second round. I wouldn't feel too comfortable if the Bills went out and took him. I would feel a sense of angst. And I don't know I know you kind of touched base on it, but I don't feel comfortable if they do that, and it just, to me, there's too much risk there. And I just don't think it's worth it, especially you have three picks here in the top half of the draft. I wouldn't touch that. I wouldn't do that. Speaking of players, though, that this player won't be available at 30. But if we're going to talk about trading up and trade up scenarios, this guy is probably right at the top of my list, Jahdae Barron of Texas. I am a fan. I love Jahdae Barron because he's not the biggest guy in the world. He's small. He's 5'11", 194, which actually really isn't small. It's more average height. He is just such a fun little chess piece. I don't know if you've gotten the chance to watch him because I know he probably won't be in the range of Bills. Have you gotten a chance to watch Jahdae Barron yet or no?
Yeah, I have. Yep.
You have? Okay, good. Because this is a player that if the Bills, if he's, let's say he falls to the 20s where you see teams that have less draft capital and they kind of want to move back and gain some more capital, this would be okay, this is your splash edition of the offseason because he, to me, is the number 2 corner in this class. I have him ahead of Will Johnson. He is an elite zone coverage player. So obviously checks that box, right? He has unreal versatility. He's played safety. He's played slot. He's played outside. This season, he played outside corner for the first time, and the tape was pretty good, which was what was exciting about him. He has really good eyes, anticipation, just all that really high football IQ. He is the total package, and he's not some elite athlete, but he's just good. I mean, he's good at run fitting. He's got good strength. He just stresses quarterbacks out when they play him. I saw when quarterbacks would go up against him, they were just so hesitant. You could just tell in their tendencies. They do not want to throw this guy's way. obviously you're going to probably have to trade up a little bit to get him. And he's not like a man coverage type of player with his size, and he can get a little bit handsy. But Ryan, would this be a player that would fit would he be worth trading up for? Is basically what I'm going to ask you. Do you think he's worth sending an extra 4th or 3rd round pick to go up and grab in the first round?
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly a player that has flaws. Like, he's coming out of his 5th season at Texas. You mentioned athleticism. He has like 13th percentile arm length, so he has short arms. And there are a lot of people. We posted a clip the other day from our recent podcast about Jahdae Barron, and there's a lot of people who don't believe he can be an outside corner. I am not of that belief. If this guy falls to 20, this guy falls to 22, I am going up and I'm getting him. I know that there's other options available, but I almost feel like the Bills in this draft, if a good player falls, should go get him. There's been rumors that it won't take as much capital to move up in this class because it is such kind of like a crapshoot draft. You don't know who's going to be available when, but I saw a lot that I liked from this guy, both man and zone ability, just a sticky corner, really good in zone. And I think that's exactly what you need, obviously, on the Bills. And then also we kind of talked on his athleticism too. He did have a 10-yard split that was 87th percentile. So he does show good burst, which obviously helps when you're dropping into coverage as a zone corner and you have to break on a ball. Everything really backs up statistically that this guy can produce on the outside. So I'm going to believe that he can. And I would sign off on moving up to get this guy.
And I think even if let's say hypothetically he doesn't work out outside, I think Taron Johnson, he's climbing up in age. He had probably his worst season as a Bill in a while. You have a guy waiting in the wings that can come in and step in, and you're pretty much getting that production again. And you're getting him on a rookie deal. And you can stomach losing a guy like Taron Johnson because you have a guy waiting in the wings, and we know how important that slot corner position is to this Bills defense. That would be like, boom, you got your next Taron Johnson. And the Bills have done a great job at replacing and replenishing talent. Obviously, Christian Benford with the Tre'Davious White kind of thing. When Tre'Davious kind of came out, Christian came in, and the Bills have done a pretty good job at stockpiling talent and have it waiting in the wings. That could be an option if he doesn't work outside. But I think he would. And I think the tape tells you, especially this season when he played the most outside corner he did in his career, he could do it. He can do it. And the one stat that really stood out to me, I was watching the NFL Stock Exchange podcast, so they did a good job of covering these guys over at PFF with Sycamore and Connor Rogers. They had mentioned the PFF WAR grade he had, which was 0.88, which for reference, that is higher than Travis Hunter, who plays 2 positions. So that just shows the kind of, impact he has on a defense. And I think absolutely, without a shadow of a doubt, he would be a slam dunk addition to this defense. But again, probably going to take a little bit to move up for him. So I had mentioned earlier how there was a guy I was going to bring up that probably might not go in the first 2 rounds and might be more of a 3rd round guy. And it's Jacob Parrish out of Kansas State. More of your mold as a slot corner, kind of going back into that conversation I had about potentially replacing Taron Johnson here in the near future. He's obviously probably going to most likely succeed as a slot corner. I know the Air Raid Hour and Judge had mentioned that he likes him as an outside guy and sort of as a DJ Reed type of player. I don't see that personally, but he could be a fun little addition. Obviously, smaller dude, 5'10", 191, had 50 tackles this season, 2.5 tackles for loss. He had 5 interceptions over the last 2 seasons. He allowed the 2nd lowest completion percentage in man coverage in 2024 of draft eligibles. And when you watch him, obviously, he's probably one of the stickiest players in this class with how good he is and how he plays at his size is kind of impressive. And that's why maybe he can play outside. I'm not sure where you stand on that. I don't know if you've done a ton of research on Jacob Parrish. Do you think he can play outside, or kind of where do you fall on Parrish as a fit for the Bills?
It's admittedly a guy I haven't got into yet. Next up on my cornerback list, funny enough. I really just kind of focused on day 1 and day 2 guys before recording our last episode, and we're going to double back for some day 3 guys. But I think the main thing here is just I am not opposed on day 3 to double dipping or taking our first corner in day 3 because of the success that Brandon Beane has had, but also Sean McDermott developing these corners.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm glad you had mentioned that, because if, let's say, somebody falls in the 4th round, maybe a guy like a Kobe Bryant or a Zy Alexander, like I feel good about that. And if a good player falls you in the 2nd round, if it's a receiver or whoever it might be, like, you have to consider it. Like, you know how good this organization is, and these organizations that are competitors and Super Bowl contenders, they take the best player available. And sometimes it's passing up on a need you might need more than another one. But it's important to factor that in. But I'll kind of get into the rest of Parrish before we move forward because I know you haven't studied him a ton yet. Very very quick and agile. He can play zone. It's a limited sample size, so I don't know the full picture there yet. But a very solid and willing tackler for his size. And again, he has experience playing both in the slot and outside. He has 150 snaps in the slot over the last 2 seasons. Fluid hips. He's 21 years old on draft night, so he's one of the younger prospects. And I think when you tie it into potentially getting a slot corner, if you want to do that as a replacement for Taron Johnson, you need somebody as a matchup piece that can handle the Lad McConkeys of the world, that can run these crossers and stay with them and take away and eliminate that part of the game because we know how much slot receivers are taking over the NFL, especially you talk about a guy like Khalil Shakir who just got paid $60 million. Like, it's an important position in today's age in the NFL, and you need guys that can really handle that. And he was somebody on tape who can absolutely fit the role and fit the billing for that. And it's like, yes, he's got the below average size. He's going to struggle against bigger receivers, especially in the red zone. It might not even be playable in the red zone. But the only question is, like, where is he going to align? Where do teams see him as? Is he a slot corner? Is he an outside guy? I would see him more of as a slot guy due to the size and due to the concerns of the limited zone, sample size. But we'll see what happens with him. I think he's a fun option, especially if you don't like what you got there in the second round. You move back and Jacob Parrish is available. Maybe take a little dart throw on him because he's a very intriguing player. But the eighth and final player we're going to talk about is probably one of the more polarizing players in class out of Kentucky. That is Maxwell Hairston. I'll let you take the lead on this one. I have a bunch of notes on him, but I knew you've been talking a little bit. So give us what you have on Maxwell Hairston.
Yeah, I'm happy you brought him up because I was not going to let us finish this podcast without bringing
No.
him up. I've seen him mocked as early, like I think on the PFF board, he's going as early as like 11 or 12.
Yeah, that's
Definitely
crazy.
not a
That's crazy.
definitely not a guy I would have up there. I wouldn't even feel comfortable taking him at 30. I don't even know if I want the Bills to pick him in the second round. First off, 5'11", 183, kind of smaller for a corner, but he
Yeah.
does have a 99th percentile 40-yard dash running a 4.28. Has a good vertical, 39.5 vert, which is 87th percentile. And his 10-yard split shows that burst too. Obviously, he had a ton of interceptions in 2023, but in 2024, he only had one, played 5 games, had a shoulder injury. But the 2023 season spoke for itself. A lot of great statistics there. Overall, for me, it's really just he's a great athlete. He is sticky in coverage, but his size is too small for my liking.
Yeah.
Doesn't really show great tackling ability. I think that thin frame will kind of expose him a little bit in the next level. But look, if he has to go and cover an Xavier Worthy, he's more than capable of doing so. So I'm interested to see where he goes. I think a more heavy man coverage scheme that maybe he can travel against faster, smaller receivers. It could be a really good fit, but that's just not the Buffalo Bills.
Yeah, so I'm kind of a little bit in the other direction. I think he'd be better as a zone corner, and there's a couple reasons why. And I know we're going to agree to disagree here, but I think that leaner frame is going to just be very difficult, especially at the NFL level against bigger receivers. And he's got the ball skills and all that go into it, but I think he lacks the desired physicality you want. He's struggles. I think he doesn't struggle. He's more inconsistent in man coverage because of the lack of play strength. You'll see the flashes, and I'm sure that's what you saw. Like, you'll see the flashes where he is going to run things down. He's going to stay to your hip, and he's going to be glued on you. But it's just inconsistent. It's hard to win when you don't have the strength. And I think he'd be a player that would benefit a lot from adding like 10 or 15 pounds. Like, he's 180, probably soaking wet. And if he adds like 10 or 12 pounds, I would say that's probably going to be very good for him. And maybe he can handle more man coverage duties. And I think, especially at the NFL level, if you want to succeed and transition to a really good cornerback, that is something you're probably going to have to do. But he has really, really elite zone instincts, very fluid, very agile player. And I think you would touch base on it briefly. The ball skills are there. And I know he got a little bit lucky with some of the interceptions. Some of them would be overthrows. Some would just be like just the receiver falling or whatever. But, he has a knack for the ball. He knows what to do. He knows how to get there. He's always in the right place for a reason. And I think you talked about his 10-yard split and his ability to burst. I think his stop and start ability is really impressive. His ability to stop on a route. He does a really nice job. And obviously he's got a really, really good relative athletic score, 9.63. But I just think the lack of physicality, he won't be able to really impact the run game. And it's like you're probably going to have to hide him a little bit early on. So it makes me question, like, what is his day one starting ability look like? Is he going to be able to play every down for you? And I would say probably not right now. I think you would have to kind of ease him into that process as he adds more weight and more playing strength to do that. But he is a fun player because of the speed. I'm not like outrageously high on him. I'm kind of somewhere in the middle. Would I be happy the Bills take him? Sure. I think he'd be a solid addition, but he's got a lot to improve on. And again, these players aren't perfect, but he's a guy I like.
I'm happy you
Before I,
mentioned, I'll
yeah,
say,
yeah, go ahead.
sorry to cut you off, just
No,
about
you're
like
fine.
physicality too, because I think a lot of his best reps, you're right, were in zone, playing 5-10 yards off the line of scrimmage. And
Yeah,
um, the biggest thing is physicality. And after we saw the Kyrie Elam experience here of just kind of not being the greatest tackler, I think that very much scares a lot of people away from prospects like this.
yeah, definitely. And I think not even just fans. Like the Bills just hate guys that don't tackle and can't impact the game in that way. Because Sean McDermott's big MO is like, we got to wrap up, we got to be tackle, we got to be disciplined, and it's important, especially if you want to be a Buffalo Bill and be a part of a really good organization, and that's what they pride themselves on, and being good at basically everything, and being in the right place and not hurting yourself. But before we kind of wrap up, I kind of wanted to get your rankings a little bit. I did a little bit of a ranking between these guys, so I'll go through my rankings first, and then we'll kind of go through yours. So obviously, number one, I'm going Travis Hunter because of his rare ball skills and ability. Then I went Jahdae Barron at my number 2 corner. I went Will Johnson 3, Trey Amos 4, and that's kind of where it stops for me as round 1 grades. Then I had Shavon Revel, Benjamin Morrison. Then I have Maxwell Hairston, and then I have Azareye'h Thomas. Then Darien Porter. I was kind of torn on Porter and Thomas. I kind of wanted to flip flop them just to age things a little different because Thomas is a younger prospect and maybe he's more likely to get a second contract. And then round 3 grade, I had Jacob Parrish. So if you kind of just share with us your rankings real quick, that'd be kind of cool, and we kind of see where you're at on these guys.
Yeah, for sure. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 corners right now, including Travis Hunter. Travis Hunter's
Okay.
my number 1. I think I see
Yep.
him as a blue chip prospect, and I have to tie some of that wide receiver ability into it too, just
Yeah,
his
that's
impact
crazy.
on the game.
Yeah.
Jahdae Barron then being my number 2 is a true number 1, day 1 pick. I mean, and then Trey Amos
Hmm.
is kind of that borderline day 1, day 2 pick. Benjamin Morrison's actually my first true day 2 corner. I really like Benjamin Morrison. Then Darien
Yeah.
Porter, I just really love his upside, especially just not being one of the guys that I see a ton of flaws with, but also not coming
Yeah.
off an injury. Then I have Shavon Revel. The thing that really just scares me away with him is the injury, but I would have him
Yeah.
much higher on my list as long as I have, the access that the Buffalo Bills have to him and can see him work out and can talk to him and ask him. So if I'm sitting there and I'm talking to him and he says that, the injury, he's feeling 100%, then he's going to move up on my board. Then I have Azareye'h Thomas, who just not the greatest athlete, as we talked about, going to move down my board. And then Maxwell Hairston. And for me, it's really just a fit with the Buffalo Bills too, the scheme that they play, mixing in injuries and flaws too, that you just want to find the best fit for the Bills. And that's how my board falls. Not necessarily
Yeah.
always the best pure prospect.
Yeah, and that's kind of how I went about it too. Just kind of finding guys that would be good scheme fits, good players, the players that you think the Bills would like. Um, but certainly a lot of good options. This cornerback class is very deep. I mean, this is if there's a year you need a corner, the Bills locked into a lot of things this year, considering their 3 biggest needs: edge, defensive tackle, corner. All 3 of those position groups, in my opinion, are all equally deep. And I think you have a plethora of options at each pick to go with, and you can go numerous avenues and kind of explore the best thing. And even if I know you talked about receiver in a podcast episode of yours. If you wanted to go receiver on day 3, you have plenty of options as well. Probably guys that are day 2 caliber players going on day 3. So a lot of value to be had in this draft, specifically for the positions the Bills need. But I got to thank you coming on again, Ryan. It was a pleasure having you on as always. You guys can check all this stuff out in the link in the description. Where can we find you? Where can we listen to you? Where can we watch your stuff? I know you have a lot of different platforms, but kind of just plug your stuff real quick so we know where we can find you.
Yeah, really appreciate you having me on. Of course, always love coming on and talking ball with
Yeah.
you. At Buff Sports Talk, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok, and then the Buffalo Sports Talk podcast, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. But yeah, I hope we have you on our podcast before the draft. I know we did our pre-draft roundtable last year and kind of answered all these different questions about different positions. So hope we can have you on again, or if not, we'll reconvene after the draft
Yeah.
and kind of grade what Brandon Bean did.
We'll definitely reconnect in the near future. And again, it was fun as always. Everybody else, have a good night. Links will be in the description below. You can check out Ryan's stuff. His links will be in the description again. We're all both affiliated with Built in Buffalo, so we do appreciate each other's work, and we've admired each other for quite some time. So it was a fun episode again. Thanks for coming on, Ryan. And everybody else, have a good night and go Bills.
Go Bills.